right. Hi, everyone. I see folks jumping in, but we'll go ahead and get started because we have a lot to cover today. Thank you for joining our session of peer reviews. It's so wonderful to do this in person with our guest. But our topic today is around AI in biopharma, taking it from vision to impact. So I'm Anita Modi. I'm the co-founder and CEO here at Pure AI. Pure AI is delivering the easiest path to automation of regulatory writing documents. So we are applying AI to author regulatory documents, including protocols, INDs, clinical study reports, safety narratives, plan legal summaries, and more, and working with biotech, pharma, and CROs to show that using AI in this use case really can drive both efficiency and quality as well. You can learn more about what we're building at www.getpure.ai. So we're sitting here today, almost at the end of Q1 2025, and I will say this year to us at Pure really feels different. You know, last year in 2024 was very much around experimentation with AI, understanding how do you prioritize, what's real, what's the value, how do we think about this for our organization? And as we shift into 2025, there's obviously still much of that, but we're starting to see a major shift into action, into implementation as well. And I'll say for me personally, starting Pure almost 2 years ago now, that shift into action and automation was so much faster than even I expected. And it's wonderful to see. But it obviously begs a lot of questions on how organizations should think about action. So to really dive into the trends and what we're seeing, on the ground, I couldn't think of anyone better to join us than Bharathram Lakshmivarahan, partner at Slalom in their healthcare practice. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Yeah. So Bharathram, can you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your role?
Sure. So hello, everybody. My name is Bharathram, client partner at Slalom. So I help to lead our life sciences practice here in Northern California for Slalom. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Slalom, we are a leading strategy and technology consulting firm. We do about $3 billion in revenue. About a third of that, $1 billion of our revenue comes directly from healthcare and life sciences. So it's a big part of what we do. And as I sit here personally, this is now year 20 for me being in this industry and being in the sector. And I still wake up excited to work with all the great innovative and noble companies across pharma, med device, and biotech. So great to be here. Excited for the conversation.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us. Well, Bharathram, you hosted me on the Slalom podcast almost a year ago now. And it was a great conversation. Feel free to go back and watch it. But as you reflect back on this year, what do you find has changed? What are you really seeing today?
Yeah, we had a robust conversation about this at the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference when we started the year this year. And as I think about, what was said at the conference, I think 2024, as you alluded to in your preamble, was really all about pilots and proof of concept and experimentation, really understanding what AI could potentially do for your organization and on a personal level for the individual. And I think 2025 is really going to be about two things. I think as I look at the industry and the way that companies are thinking about AI, it's a prove it year where we're seeing a lot of executives starting to mandate to the business an understanding of what the value of AI is really going to be, to a point where now some of the executives are saying, if we don't see X amount of value over the next 12 to 24 months, we're just not going to fund that initiative and it's on to the next one. So I think that's one thing I'll say about 2025. The other thing I'll say about this year is, as we look back to last year, and really last couple of years after ChatGPT showed up, it was really about summation AI and generative AI. And I think 2025 is going to be the year of exploring agentic AI and how agents and machines are going to take the best available data and start to think about autonomous decision making, which is a term that I know probably scares the heck out of a lot of general counsels and chief compliance officers out there. But the reality is that's where we are today. That's where the tech is. And so I think that's really going to be the crux of what we focus on this year.
Yeah. I want to come back to ROI and some of the benchmarking you're talking about. But help make this real for us. What are some examples you're seeing kind of in practice on how biotech and pharma companies are using Gen AI in their workflows today?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think as I think about some of the bigger investments that we're seeing made, I think in R&D, we've been talking about using AI in drug development and discovery for years. So that's not the new part of AI and R&D. I think the piece in R&D that I think needs to be focused on more, and it is getting focused on more, is using AI to recruit the right patients for clinical trials.
Mm-hmm.
So as I think about this era where personalized medicine is everything, and the individual genotype is really the currency for these companies now, as you get more into personalized medicine, how can you find the right people to fit the right trials at a given point in time? So I think the use of AI platforms to go out and find the needles in the haystack and put those right people in trials is going to be a continued work in progress, particularly for companies that haven't invested a lot in that space. The next thing I look to is supply chain. So I think the pandemic clearly exposed vulnerabilities in the supply chain, and in some cases show where it was completely broken. And I think we've seen companies start to invest in more automation on figuring out how they do inventory management better and stock allocation better and more predictive analytics to be able to respond in a way that's more resilient. Still work in progress, I think, in the supply chain side of it, but we're starting to finally see the lights turn on for some of those folks in that part of the organization. And then I think about medical affairs, which I think has finally been elevated to that third pillar in biopharma. And it's a function that's typically been using data in different ways, but it's very intensive, it's very labor driven, it's very burdensome. And so being able to use AI to basically take disparate sources of data from CRM, real world evidence, data from studies, and be able to use that cohesively to then create summaries for medical literature and disease state presentations, things like that is really huge. And so those are some of the three big areas that I see right now. We can talk about this for hours, but I think those are three areas that kind of pop up immediately for me.
And maybe I'll ask, and maybe this is tied to ROI where I want to go, but how are organizations deciding, against those use cases and where to ultimately start? They're so disparate, all high value. How do you see them making those decisions?
I think this is probably one of the biggest problems that we still see in life sciences and probably across other industries as well. But there's really two camps that we see life sciences companies kind of playing in right now to figure out ROI. So I think there's one camp that is still thinking about using more of the traditional standard methods of your ROI calculators and really trying to understand cost, whether that's implementation, people, the technology costs, and weighing it up against benefits, which is what is the benefit of actually using an AI use case to the end, and what are the potential adoption strategies, things like that. So that's one camp. And then the other camp is basically saying the ROI calculator is dead. And it's more about business value and outcomes. And I think for me, there's no wrong answer, there's no right answer here. I think the key is to basically find a set of standards that use a comprehensive set of variables, and then use that across the organization, where it's not commercial having its fiefdom and its secret sauce, and medical affairs having its secret sauce, et cetera. It's a standard uniform, kind of methodology that we can use across the organization.
Yeah. I mean, I think we see it a lot, where we plan sort of medical writing. It's a very measurable area for ROI. You think about hours, you think about efficiency. We've had to come up with metrics around defining quality. How do you actually show ROI when it comes to quality, even if it's tied to efficiency on the back end? But I'll say one question we get often, or I think I see organizations thinking about, is how do you benchmark ROI? Is there a number they should hit this year over year? When is it worth it to make the investment? Do you see any sort of standardization in benchmarking?
I think the real answer right now is no. I think we're trying to find ways to categorize companies. And so you think about biopharma specifically, there's probably a cohort of your large cap companies and figuring out what they're doing. And honestly, kind of everybody else, kind of the mid cap and small caps are going to have their own sets of benchmarks. And that's, I think it's directly correlated to investment. You're not going to be able to compare a small company with Pfizer or Novartis, obviously, who have invested millions and millions of dollars over years in AI. So I think the short answer is no, but we're trying to find, the right cohorts to be able to benchmark and provide that insights to the industry still.
Yeah. And I think what we also hear is, it may not be one big bang, it's a lot of incremental support that's helping build your ROI story across the organization as well. Which brings me to my next question, which I think half of this is thinking about the right use case and the tools. And the other half is creating the environment for success, right? So much of this is around change management, around deployment, around decision-making. What have you seen as you look at sort of action and implementation? What is common in those environments to actually create success when it comes to AI?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we're doing a lot of work in this space right now to figure out what is the right kind of mix of things to guarantee success at organizations. And I think for us, it really starts with op model and governance, and really trying to figure out what is the right op model for every company. So, on one end of the spectrum, we have companies that are doing a fully centralized model where it's kind of an oligarchy of folks that are running point on creating policy, creating standards, and everything kind of flows through that small set of folks, which in some sense is good because you have a standard across the company. But the flip side is you might slow down innovation, you might slow down velocity, you might slow down response time. The other end of the spectrum is a completely decentralized model where you kind of have each department or functional area driving their own set of standards, which is the opposite end of the story, right? You can increase velocity, you can increase response time, but then you risk redundancy across the organization, and you might put your business at risk for doing things they shouldn't be doing. So I think we're probably kind of going towards the median, towards kind of a more federated model, where companies are thinking about putting in place kind of a governance committee of folks that's usually cross-functional, includes legal, obviously, and compliance, obviously, to kind of set a set of guardrails, not overly harsh to the business, but really putting guardrails in place, but still democratizing data and allowing the business to have the freedom to run their own use cases and be able to innovate as they can freely. So I think the pendulum has swung in a couple of different directions. I think we're finally coming to the mean towards kind of this federated model.
Are we far enough to tell which of these models is the best, or the best for certain stage of company, let's say?
I don't think we have enough longitudinal data to say which is the best, but I think in theory, federated is probably the right way. And if you even think about the federated structure, there's that in itself is a spectrum.
Sure.
So I think there's more time that needs to pass for us to really figure out what is going to be the best way to do this. But I think that variable, or that kind of derivative of a federated model is probably the right way to go.
Yeah. I'll say from our seat, we've seen the full range, and I think it's a bit of a work even in progress. We'll start a conversation, and then the governance model comes in, and I think it's great. I think you do want a cross-functional team ultimately, because it's so multifaceted, thinking about security and privacy, let alone the business impact. So I think what we've seen is having that backbone of a strategy helps move so much faster at the end of the day.
Absolutely. I think I do want to say one other thing with respect to op model and governance. I think it's very important to also have a team or a committee that's basically having a pulse on the regulatory environment. So we know in the FDA here in the United States, they have a very difficult job of trying to push some of these innovations through and making sure that companies can get product to market faster, but also making sure that the right speed bumps are in place. So we know that there's been over 1,000 medical devices that have kind of gone through the paces that are AI enabled. So we have data to show that the FDA is in favor of doing this. And I think they've done a very good job, quite frankly, of putting out releases to make sure that they are advancing their own thinking of how to use AI more effectively. We are now literally a year removed from the EU passing the AI Act. And there's a lot of implementation effort that's going to come out this year as well. So I'm not a lawyer by trade. I'm not allowed to give legal advice, but I think at the back end of all these regulations, it's important that there are folks within the organization that has a pulse on what the governing bodies are saying.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've found guidance to be very thoughtful, appropriately risk-based, but I agree with you. And it's one of the top topics that comes up in our conversations too.
Yep.
Next question for you. This is a topic close to me, and I may be biased. How have you seen companies that you work with think about building versus buying? The quintessential pharma debate.
We've been talking about this for years in various capacities, but I think it's even more relevant now with AI. And for us, when we have these conversations, we as consultants obviously have beautiful slides, but we have one slide that we put on the screen first, and it has one key question on the slide. And we're asking our clients, does your organization have the data, the capability, and the time to build something with AI that's better than what's out in the market today?
Data, capability, time.
Yeah. And it's not an or, it's an and. So we view data, capability, and time equally. And if the answer to that question is even in question for any one of those variables, then I think a company is not doing justice by then going out and looking in the marketplace and seeing what's out there. So that is the key question. The next thing I would then say is, what do we even mean by buy? So there's a couple of different things that can mean. It can mean, AI deployment tools, kind of low code and no code enablers that can help you build something faster and better and cheaper. There are as a service AI models that you can go out there and buy from hyperscalers and other kind of niche vendors. There are plugin components that can essentially integrate seamlessly into your existing software to supercharge the capabilities. So even the question around what does buy mean, I think has to be answered at your company. But again, it comes down to those three variables. And if you can't clearly say yes to any one of those things, I'm not going to say you have to go out and buy, but you should at least go look.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it goes back to what we started with, right? The governance model, the ops model, having a clear view on what are you investing in as a company and where do you stand on those?
Yep.
I'll say from our seat, we kind of joke about the build boomerang, companies that a year ago set out to build and have found probably didn't answer that question, truthfully, and have hit real challenges either in staying up to date. I mean, I think AI is its own beast in terms of staying up to date with the newest sort of models and technology and ultimately achieving, the value that you want in these specific use cases. Comes back to what we were saying, do you have a governance strategy? Do you have a way to prioritize kind of where you expect to see those that ROI and make that investment?
Yeah. And I think also by going out looking in the marketplace to seeing what you can buy.
Sure. Yeah.
It really helps you think about your own internal processes better, because some of these companies, yours included, can really push the boundaries on, the right way or a better way forward on how to do things from start to finish.
Yeah.
And so I think that's another key component to at least getting better information on how to do something from start to finish better.
Yeah.
We're proponents of it. Obviously, we have great partnerships out in the marketplace with a lot of companies. Although we try to remain agnostic, but it's a big part of what we do in trying to figure out, what's the right equation for companies.
Yeah. Our advice has always been whether you build or buy or you start here and then move there, start. Start. Because at least we've seen in all of our engagements, companies just learn so much by doing, even understanding where could this fit in, what do they need to solve in terms of workflow or team or culture. Like there is change management as you bring in sort of new ways of working. So our advice has always been at least start somewhere.
Yeah.
And find the right place to start.
That's good advice.
Yeah. What advice do you have for folks in this space, biotech pharma leaders, as they're thinking about really what's next?
I think first and foremost is just be a student.
Yeah.
Because this area is changing so fast. The number of tools that are entering the marketplace is growing so rapidly. And what AI means is also changing rapidly as well. So we do a lot of work with executives at companies around AI literacy and things like that. And I think the number one thing we tell folks at the top is just be a student and learn what this means. You don't have to become, an LLM engineer or anything like that, but just understand, what AI is today and what it can mean in the future. And I think the second thing for executives that we think about is learn from the business, talk to the business frequently. AI is not new by nature, but it is definitely new in our daily lives, both at the enterprise level and at the personal level.
Yeah.
And so I think, as you talk to the business and understand what they're trying to solve, question why they're trying to solve it, understanding what the barriers are, whether that's internal data quality, whether that's process. Do we have is our tech good enough to even solve what we're trying to achieve? All of that's going to happen just through open dialogue. And so I think that's the second thing, is just learn from the business and encourage that kind of two-way street where there is no ego on the table and you're really trying to figure out the better way to solve problems.
Yeah. Well, Bharathram, I see some questions rolling in. Before I open it up, any final thoughts to close with?
No, I think this is exciting. I think probably a conversation we could probably have another 6 months. It'll be very different.
Yes, we should.
So looking forward to some questions though.